Thank you. You'll
Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I want to address something that we've talked about before, and that is the Federal Highway Administration's proposed greenhouse gas emissions performance measure to force state departments of transportation and metropolitan planning organizations to cut carbon emissions stemming from transportation on the national highway system. You know, I've voiced my concerns about this in opposition to this proposal, which has demonstrably exceeds the administration's authority. The policy was specifically considered and disposed of during negotiation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The Federal Highway Administration announced its final rule last November despite not having the authority to do so, and as a result, 22 states sued as part of 2 separate lawsuits. This spring, 2 federal courts found that the rule exceeds the Federal Highway's statutory authority. Yet now we learn that you're going to appeal that ruling. Can you tell us why? Why are you squandering time and resources to appeal a decision that's been adjudicated in court, and clearly you had no authority to make that rule? So explain that, if you would.
Sure. I'm not going to comment on our courtroom strategy. What I will say is
I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for the sense behind why you're challenging the ruling when you clearly didn't have the authority.
We don't believe that that's accurate. And of course, we will comply with any and all relevant court rulings. That's what we're doing in the meantime.
Let me ask you this. How much is this setting you back? And by you, I mean the Department of Transportation, and by Department of Transportation, I mean the American taxpayer. How much is this costing?
I haven't seen a costing in terms of hours of work spent on this.
That's a shame. You know, you got $661 billion to the Department of Transportation in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, $661 billion. And the things that we should be focusing on, like, for example, parking spaces for truck drivers.
I'm glad you raised that. As you probably know, we're building parking spaces for truck drivers.
Instead of spending the money on parking spaces, you're spending the money on appeals in the court system.
The grant programs for parking spaces don't come out of the same part of the budget as lawyers working on appeals, Congressman.
You really think it's a good allocation of taxpayer resources to challenge a legal decision for which you have no authority to make a rule on?
Yes, anything we do we think is a good allocation of taxpayer resources. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
Well, I guess the taxpayers probably feel differently about it, because I hear about this all the time from folks in my district that actually build the highways. See, we're responsible for paying for the highways. You're responsible for making sure they're getting done, but the people who actually do the work, they got a problem with this. Let me turn to another matter. Since I was first elected to Congress, I've worked to improve the safety of our nation's roadways. The American public should remain confident that our professional commercial motor vehicle drivers are operating safely throughout the country. In 2011, I introduced the Safe Roads Act, which was incorporated in MAP 21, and the creation of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's National Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. My Drug-Free Commercial Driver Act, which was included in the FAST Act, would allow hair testing for CMV drivers, which is a much better way to ensure that habitual drug users are not operating in safety-critical roles. The Department of Health and Human Services continues to fail to implement that requirement. I'm going to continue to remind them to do their job. The Department of Justice just published a rulemaking seeking to reclassify marijuana from Schedule I narcotic to Schedule III. Under current law, trucking and other safety-critical transportation workers are required to be tested for certain drugs, including marijuana. Marijuana continues to be the drug most frequently seen by CMV drivers in their testing, reported to FMCA Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. The rescheduling and deregulation of marijuana would inevitably cause a number of people driving impaired while high to grow. The American Trucking Association has transmitted 2 letters to your agency highlighting these concerns. I would ask to unanimous consent to submit those into the record. Mr. Secretary, I think it's safe to assume that, you know, the number of all impaired drivers on our roadways would increase with that ruling. Can you speak to what your department's doing to ensure that transportation workers in safety-reliant positions can continue to be tested for marijuana use if this proposal goes forward, and how your department plans to address transportation safety in light of DOJ's rulemaking?
Thank you. Yes, any impaired driving, be it alcohol, marijuana, or any other source of impairment, is, of course, a major safety concern. Our understanding of the rescheduling of marijuana from Schedule I to Schedule III is that it would not alter DOT's marijuana testing requirements with respect to the regulated community. For private individuals who are performing safety-sensitive functions subject to drug testing, Marijuana is identified by name, not by reference to one of those classes. So even if it moves in its classification, we do not believe that that would have a direct impact on that authority. Likewise, I should mention for federal employees, including any DOT employees who have a security clearance or a safety-sensitive position, we do not understand that to be changed, any drug testing requirement relevant to that, to be changed based on the reclassification decision. But we're continuing to evaluate any indirect impacts that it might have.
Thanks. Go back.